This is 2OF Entertainment.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Long time no see, Paul.
It has been, yeah. We usually deal with Steve a little bit, but looking forward to working with you for the next little while and producing a Canadian art today. I would just sort of go into a bit here. We have a really good show today, more than just a single artist. We're having an actual panel discussion, and the discussion really came about from just looking at art and trying to figure out why artists go down a certain road and why they maybe haven't developed, or looking for a way to develop, and maybe working with their galleries somehow, figuring out where sometimes they feel a little stale. Like, how do you get out of that groove that you need to get on a new road with some pavement on it? You got to forge your own way a little bit. So we've come up with an idea that it's an element of risk probably might be needed of some kind that we're going to look at, and we're going to discuss hopefully the different types of risks that are out there that an artist may have to hurdle at times. Just trying to figure out where are they and trying to find their rhythm in what they're doing. And we have a great panel of our artists, and we have an artist, but also a gallerist, and I guess she's an art consultant as well. So I don't want to give too much away, but why don't we just maybe bring Joanne in, and we'll talk to Joanne. And
good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Joanne she's helped a lot of artists over the years, and I think she's got an expertise that can see from a different corner for the artist quite a bit. And I really do encourage artists that are requiring some help, and just a little talk even sometimes, just to figure out where they're going. Because sometimes you can't see where you're going unless somebody can help you see your direction, especially in the art business. And Joanne's the person. She's my go-to person for advice when I advise people to go. So welcome, Joanne. And
thank you so much, Paul. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, and then maybe just bring Mark in here.
Yeah, I'll just make some room for Mark then. See you guys at a little bit later in the show. Have a great show.
Okay. Yeah. Well, here's morning. Mark. Good morning, Mark. And
morning, Paul.
How's the smoke there today? It's a hot day again today?
Yeah, it's hot. I'm actually up on the shores of Georgian Bay, and yesterday it was noticeable. Today is much better, so hopefully we're moving in the right direction.
We're all kind of dealing with that issue with that. Yeah. I appreciate you joining us, Mark. And Mark's with Cloud, the owner of Cloud Gallery in Aurelia. And I really appreciate your perspective in our role here of discussing an element of risk. Now I bring Ian in, I guess, and Ian is our. There we go.
Hi, morning.
Good morning, Ian. Thank you. And Ian McLean is an accomplished artist, I guess, and I'll call him contemporary artist in his subject matter. And we're going to go through a series of just our conversation between artists and gallery and consultant. I think, Ian probably better known. You've been on Canadian Landscape Artist of the Year. Was that 2020? Was that
2020?
That was the initial year with CBC. I think half a country tuned in to watch that show, and rooted their artists on, and it lasted longer on TV probably than it did in the actually plein air aspect of it.
Yeah.
Anyway, just trying to get in. We're just gonna put everybody off the sidebars a little bit. I think. Do you have any questions at the moment to start with between our panel? Are we good to go? Okay. Well, put everybody off when we start our first slide up, and then we can just have, start our conversations up here a little bit. I think you get David to start our slide up. Hopefully. There we go. I think we should probably also have, there we go. There's our side panel. Perfect. Thanks, David. And this is basically what we're going to try and discuss today. I'm going to lead off with what Mark and I had a little side conversation the other day when we were just trying to talk about this. And we're talking about risk is really a part of learning. Like learning and risk are they're necessity. There's a necessary, they need to be joined together for one to have the other. Do you learn because of risk? Mark, do you have a little bit more to expand on some of that, the learning aspects of taking a risk?
Yeah, sure, Paul. Yeah, like we had that brief chat, and I mean, I think if you're not taking a risk, you're not learning anything new, or probably anything innovative or creative. So it's tied very closely with the creative process, this knowing when to take risk. And, I think the best artists, the most successful business people, anyone can take risk, but it's seeing the opportunities in a way that allows you to make strategic, smart decisions around risk and learning together, right? So as a business person, we look at decisions all the time that involve some risk and reward, and we try to get really good at analyzing both of those to make a good decision. And I think as an artist, you're continually doing the same thing. And in fact, both on the creative side, and Joanne can speak to this, and I know she talks to a lot of artists about this, but also on the business side of your art practice. So, learning is central to creativity and the creative process, and risk is a big part of that. And, typically the most successful business people and artistic people are really talented at assessing risk and seeing it as an opportunity to learn and grow. And in business, it's very similar. So that's, I see it from both sides all the time with our artists in the gallery on our roster. And then for myself in the art business, and of course in other businesses that I've been involved with over the years as well.
Right. Yeah. So Joanne, where does an artist look at, how do they go about the risk for themselves? Where do they look to, I guess, inspiration? Where do they look? Because does risk just pop out of the middle of nowhere and say, I'm just going to do something different today? Or is that kind of do you set a day aside to do your risky stuff and then say, do I implement that? How do you advise an artist to consider that learning aspect, like stretch yourself a little bit? How do you do that?
I think artists know when it is time within themselves to take a risk. Whether they choose to take it or not is another thing. But when you sort of have difficulty in showing up in your studio on a day-to-day basis and just feel that sense of restlessness that you want to explore other things, but you don't know how, you don't know when is the time to do it. And of course, the most debilitating thing for artists to face is fear of failure. So I think that, as a panel, we can probably talk about that. But what I've experienced in the last year in my business is that more and more artists are frustrated, wanting change, and networking with other artists for opinions. But I do think that there is now an air of risk-taking, which seems much more probable for an artist to think about doing than in the past.
Right. Well, I'm going to switch the panel to, I was sourcing, risk a little bit online a little bit and seeing how other people perceived it. And musicians are notorious risk takers. You know, if you're known as a genre of just playing hip hop, can you switch over to something else, or can you do jazz and then do some other things? So I think they're very similar to actual like visual artists as well. And David Bowie is he's an advocate for change and risk and pushing the envelope. I encourage people, if you just look at some of his videos that he's made out there, a little bit about how he has repositioned himself X amount of times over his career. Like every decade seemed to be changing. He's a little theatrical on stage, now passed away, but I think understanding that you're immersed in what you're doing, the creativity aspect of loving what you do, like that's where it starts. Like you really, like Joanne, you got to go to that studio every day and want to do that. Ian, how what's your perspective on, say, David Bowie's statement here, that the true creativity happens when you're slightly out of your depth? You're out of your depth. You're pushing boundaries and exploring new territory.
Yeah, well, for sure. I mean, I guess my starting point is the kind of work that I like to see and the kind of work that I've studied in the past. So I'm a huge fan of art history and studying the masters. And the thing that has always drawn me to certain painters, I'm thinking like Manet, Velázquez, Degas, Goya, something that connects me to them and something that I find very compelling. And so I like that idea of pushing the envelope a little bit and trying to really connect with the viewer in some way. So I feel with my work, I have something I want to say, and I definitely want to try to connect with the viewer in some very visceral way. Yeah,
this is this is from your site as well, a little bit about how you believe in what you're doing. And I think is it important for an artist to do some writing about their work? Is it, like, anybody can answer that? How do you feel, Joanne? Is it important? Do you encourage them to write as well as paint if they do that?
Well, I think that there is a very necessary element to writing your thoughts down and expressing yourself in your own mind, because often it's just a dog's breakfast of ideas that come forward, and it can be very frustrating for an artist to experience that overwhelm without really knowing where they're going. I like, and Ian, you can address this, but I like the word slightly in David Bowie's sentence, because I think that artists want to take a risk, but they don't want to go headfirst into your term of Paul shock and awe. So Ian, when I look at your piece here and I think about your work that has happened in the past, what kinds of things are still tying your work together from your past practice, but now introducing new elements of risk into what you're doing?
Yeah, I think, again, I chose oil painting as my medium. It's just my comfort zone. It's something that I've done forever, but I love the history that's involved with it. So I love following some of those technical traditions with my art. But as a Canadian, I'm thinking, what did I grow up with? I grew up with Canadian landscape painting. I grew up with a group of 7. We all did. It was kind of part of our culture, and certainly very much a huge influence. But I guess I've always thought, for me in particular, what is my landscape? How does it relate to me? And from my perspective, it's been very much the built environment. So very much about the human condition and how we relate to the landscape and our connection to it. So I'm a huge fan of architecture, and certainly I live in very much a semi-urban environment. So it was important for me to include that with my landscape. So it's something I continue to do and I've done for many years. Certainly that idea of marrying traditions in art, pushing the envelope a little bit, trying to push the envelope a little bit, trying to include something of the unexpected in the work, and also very much connect with who we are today and how it relates to us today, how we connect with the landscape.
Because your color palette is different. Would you say that your palette has changed over time, or is that something that's remained constant in your work?
Yeah, I'm definitely using color to provoke in some way and to connect with the viewer in some way. I definitely want there to be a familiarity. I think certainly the image that we're looking at now, I'm intentionally choosing a type of architecture that I think so many of us, certainly in Southwestern Ontario, which is where I am, can definitely connect with. But I'm wanting to do more than simply rendering and simply replicating what I see, but trying in some way to use color to draw the viewer in, to question maybe what we're looking at, and to evoke certain kinds of emotions with the work.
Yeah,
that red door is pretty appealing.
Yeah. I mean, you react, and that's what I like to see when I look at other people's work. I want to react to it. I want to, and I love the feeling of mystery that I might see in someone else's work. I like work that leaves some questions, and we all, I guess the goal with my work is for us to, I personally have a connection to what I'm doing, where the work is coming from, but I also like work that can, paintings that can work at different levels and maybe different avenues into the work. So color may be one of the ways that I want to provoke the viewer. I want to draw the viewer in. I want the viewer to study and question and maybe wonder in so many different ways.
Yeah, it's this one has a context of really a statement on suburbia. How we get some mic feedback here happening, but I don't think the goal is to evaluate a person's artwork. But I think seeing the growth from the previous earlier pieces to now. So we're back here from 09, like this is 09. What's going on here? We got some ding, and we go up to here today. So you're looking to the growth of. My goodness, we got some terrible feedback happening. Are you hearing the feedback as well?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll continue. Maybe it will resolve itself. Anyway, we'll move on a little bit talking about. We have some other samples of risk takers. Blake Ward is he's a master sculptor, works in all the mediums, and I think we're going to show some of his bronze stuff. He worked in classical works. That's how he was trained as a classical sculptor. His figures were pristine and exacting, and he measured and he did all these things. And I'm just going to give a little synopsis of him rather than a full bio on him. But I think risk has really been a huge part of his development. I've watched him over the years. He's a member of Artists in Canada, and I appreciate that. And he's a full-time artist, sculptor. He's got world presence, a lot of galleries across Canada that handle his work. But so when he starts off in and I'm just going to show a progression of an artist where he's sort of where you start, where you've been, and now kind of where he is today. And so you can see how maybe some of the risk that he's actually physically taking in his subject matter, and the reason why, whether he's making social commentary subtly with it and not so subtly, and how it is maybe integrated right into his work. And you figure out how it still looks like Blake Ward, though. Like, that's the nice thing. You can carry that similar look throughout. You don't have to give that up, when risk taking. It's sort of a context thing. So at the top, you see his early piece, and he worked in marble. And you can see his very, almost lifelike types imagery. He was very meticulous and precision. They got really tired about a number of years ago. He loved it because he's kind of finicky about his work. But then what happens is he travels. Now, travel I think influences risk. Like they belong together, because you go see a painting at, Delacroix or something, and maybe that you saw it in real life. It affects you as a painter. His travels, he taught in Hanoi, and he's been in Cambodia and Vietnam. I'm just going to quickly go through. So this is sort of where he is now from his early days of sculpture, his figure. So what had happened, a lot of times he had seen while he was teaching, a number of the people that he'd seen on the street had no arms, part of a leg missing. They were disfigured, and it was from landmines, and it really physically affected him. And he thought he could make a difference by implementing that into your sculpture. So he physically destroyed a really nice figure that he had made in the wax of the clay, and he would actually tear it apart. And then now he's showing even more, just the new processes he's going through with digital printing and different things. He can now print inside the sculpture. That becomes really important to see the inside as much as the exterior of it. So, and I'm not going to, the one on the right, Fallen Hero, was more about you and I and all the little mistakes we make and the freedom you can still have. It's very joyous. It's very different than the one on the left, but it's still Blake Ward. Ian, can you comment on some of the stuff that Blake's been done? As far as the risk that he's taking for, what he's getting out of it, and we'll get to Mark in a minute here.
Yeah, I mean, they're highly ambitious artworks, technically very ambitious artworks, and certainly that's a risk that he's taking. Sculpture is not necessarily for everybody, in that not everybody has space for a sculpture. If they're considering purchasing one, maybe it's easier to hang something right on a wall rather than in the middle of your room or on a plinth. But I definitely like his, it's not what you think of when you think of a bronze sculpture. I'm thinking of the one on the right with the paint applied to it, right? We don't often think of adding color to something like that. So it is nice to see him pushing those boundaries a little bit, pushing what's expected of a sculptor, pushing what's expected of particularly, bronze sculptures. I like the fact that he's pushing that envelope a bit.
Yeah.
How big are they, Paul?
Oh, I'm guessing these. Well, I think in that initial slide, he's kneeling beside him, so they're a couple feet high, 2 feet high. They're 24 inches, somewhere in that height. They are ambitious pieces. This one in the front's either, I'm guessing it's 18 or 20 inches high at least. Yeah. Mark, if you had an artist like Blake in your gallery, I know you handle mostly paintings and two-dimensional works like that, but if you saw your artist change from when you brought him in initially and he did these pristine figures that everybody could somewhat relate to, and it's not for, and they're not for everybody. Not everybody wants, say, a nude in their home or their business. But then how do you talk to a customer that, say, the artist is really invested in his work, has commitment to it? He maybe is going down a political road a little bit, or a social road that might be a little ambiguous, a little bit sketchy at times for the average person until they get used to it. How do you handle something like that as a gallerist?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you put it in that term, in that situation, Paul, because as I was looking at the images and I just kept thinking, I'm just full of admiration for an artist to go down the journey that he has taken with such a transformation in his work. I mean, that's very brave. And I'm just curious, what has the reception been to his journey and this very huge change in terms of what his work is? Has it been well received?
He's a well-established artist. He's a Canadian artist working in a studio in Monaco. You don't live in Monaco for free. So his sculptures are expensive. They have a limited market. They are probably collectors that are edgier. They're looking for stuff that has questions in it more than answers. I'm looking at that. Where people say, because if you look at this one, you say, what the heck happened to this sculpture? Did somebody bump into this thing? They ran into it with a bulldozer, you know. But you look at it's been pre-planned. It's as well or better made than the one on the right. I mean, he's really. I remember him talking about him going. He took a year off to develop just finding the right foundry in France. He deals with, I think it's France or Spain, one or the other, and they're working together on how do you produce those pieces of work that he wants, and he wanted a certain look and a way of doing it. That's highly risked. Like, take a year off to develop that alone and work with and trust your foundry. This is what you do. And him and his wife, Boki, they work together now as a team. They're involved in all the pieces, and she's an admirable sculptor as well. And they're working in this, you know, they got a big studio. You don't have that if you're not successful. You have to have that. It's got to be in your heart. You really have to believe in yourself big time before you can convince your gallerists to believe in you. Yeah.
He's also built up an incredible reputation over a 35-year career. And so I always say to any artist, whether it's an emerging artist or an established artist, you know, you are building your reputation so that your brand, that's in my world, becomes recognizable. So this is a work, you know, by a well-established Canadian artist for years, and so he can sell his work for $60,000-$70,000. And he still has a market for that. But it is based on his reputation in the art world and the gallerist or the galleries that have been behind him to support this practice.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you're a collector, how many of, say, this figure on the left would you want? You say, well, maybe I'd like a little bit from each of his era. So now you're collecting, a collector can look, I've got a body of his, maybe 4 pieces that encompasses 30 years of his work, and say you have a more rounded feeling of a development of an artist. So rather than buying a one-off and you say, okay, I'll move on to somebody else. He said, I love his work, but wow, you go into the gallery next week and he's done something blow your mind out different, yet it still looks like his work. So,
but how do collectors buy additional pieces? And Mark, you can answer that question because you have collectors that come back time and time again for a certain artist's work. So, you know, how do you deal with those collectors that are, sorry, we're off topic, but I'm just curious about that.
Yeah. Well, excuse me. I think it ties into this example too, though, in that our top, what I would consider our top selling artists, are the ones that are always, or are more likely to take upon themselves to try new things, and they're not sure about it. As you know, Joanne, they often they'll talk to me about it and almost ask for permission, and I'm like, you know, I encourage you to do that. I you know, your work is your work, and if you want to do something different, I think that's really great for you as an artist, and it's probably going to be great for us, because like this example shows, these top artists know what risks to take inherently. I think that's what makes them so successful in the first place, is that they have continually evolved and grown and done things differently to get to the top. And so, you know, we encourage it. And what often happens, Joanne, is the collectors that have already bought, you know, 4 pieces from that artist see this new work or a new direction, and guess what? They love it too. And then it makes it easier for them to buy that next piece because it is different and new, and they're rewarded for taking the risk.
You're also supporting the artist for taking the risk. Like you're saying to the artist, after they produce a new piece or in a new direction, you're also saying to the artist, I will support you because I believe in what you're doing, but I also have to sell your new vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I trust them and their abilities and their creativity to do it in a way that it will work out well for for all of us, for the collectors, for us, the gallery, and the artist. And it's really rewarding to be part of that process in a small way. It's ultimately up to the artist to have that courage and ability. And for me to just be there to support them, I feel really good about that, but it's a small part of the process. But I guess it's a necessary one too, right? That's what you end up doing a lot of the time. I'm guessing as well.
Okay, we'll go on to I've known Terry Graff for a number of years. He's a gallerist, public galleries. He's done an awful lot of painter. He works in assemblage. He's had quite a career, and I really love Terry's work because and you're going to look at some of the next slides that I've got of him. And he's just saying from his like very, very early years, you can see an artist that how he started. I don't know. His parents must have saved everything he ever drew. Everything. He came from a loved art family, and encouraged him right from very early years. But you can see how that he's kept to a point where he's got this theme that goes through his work, even since he was a child to today, and the development that it went through. Like I don't have a body of work from my early years. I wish my mom would have maybe kept, because they were really bad, but she threw them out. They didn't even make it to the fridge, I don't think, half the time. But anyway, I think it's when you see Terry's work, and he is an adamant commentator on what's happening around us, whether it be environment, our wars, and different things that are social things that we as humans go through on a silly daily basis. And he sit back, not like a voyeur, but you sit back and you look and you say, are we ever silly? And he does these amazing assemblages that I guess they mimic wildlife and different things in a context married with I guess our machines and different things that we're doing. And we'll just go through. So here we go. You can sort of see what we're talking about. I mean, this top left piece is from his 1960s, from the early years of drawing down to contemporary pieces that he's presently doing. I always thought, and Terry is, he just had, I guess, I'm just in New Brunswick, I think, Joanne, where
he was in Fredericton.
In Fredericton, but they had just purchased, and as part of their gallery, 70 of his pieces are now part of the permanent collection. So somebody out there is saying this is important stuff, very dustable. But anyway, there's like a lot of things to dust on Terry's stuff, but I think there's a lot going on. Like there's very complicated pieces, and I think you can sit there and look for them for hours. Ian, what is you've seen, I think, Terry's work over the years, probably a little bit. How do you respond to some of that as far as risk taking goes?
Yeah, I mean, the work just seems so. I mean, I was about to use the word sincere and honest, which is not to dismiss so many other. We're all doing what we need to do. We're all taking the direction that we need to take, and I love the fact that he's not necessarily trying to follow commercial trends or what he perceives as trends. He's producing the work that he needs to produce, and the images that he needs to work with, and I love that fact that he's kind of throwing caution to the wind, and again, really wanting, I think, to connect with the viewer in some way. So the viewer has to respond on some level to what we're looking at. Either we're definitely intrigued by the imagery that he uses, and we're drawn into it, and maybe in other times maybe a little perplexed. And I think that's the richness of what Terry's doing.
Yeah, I think storytelling is really a big part of what his works are. Every piece has a story, and when you start looking at, you're working with salvaged and found materials to make a new subject, right? So you're finding this and that from wherever I could only imagine where his grad sailing goes. I don't know where he finds all this stuff. It's amazing. But I think when you put all this together, there's a story, and each piece that he adds to that there's contradictions and all kinds of things that happen within it, even down to the kind of paint he puts on it and different things. So I don't know. I've always been, I thought when I first saw Terry's work years ago, it was just like, oh my goodness, what is he doing? He's doing something very different than a lot of other artists are doing. He's found an avenue to go down that's him. Nobody else, I don't know if anybody else could really do what he's doing. He's got, look at the years, doing it since the 1960s. He's been thinking about this all his life to get to where he is today. Joanne, you got a little bit about Terry, a little bit? I'm going to put into this one. This is sort of the piece. This is where he is today. So you can see, it's really kind of black and silver. But they're beautiful. They almost feel Elizabethan. They feel very, 17th century, 18th century type of thing, wheels and just these little carts and things. And they have lots of questions in them. Each one packed full of questions. Joanne, sorry.
I mean, I would love to talk to this guy's kindergarten teacher because I suspect he was that kid in class, probably ADHD, off in his own little zone, doing his thing. But one of the things that comes to mind is that I have to think, does he pause to ask himself questions like, do I care what the response is to this work? Or am I just going to put it out there and see what happens? I mean, is he letting rejection in any shape or form? Because he will have had rejection as an artist, you always do. And has he had points in his career where he's felt a little bit deflated about taking risks that haven't turned out so well?
Yeah, no, I'm sure he has. I mean, he's an experienced artist, and when you start showing stuff that is very different than your neighbor artists or what places are, a lot of his stuff's been in public gallery spaces and his installations. I didn't have room to put all that. I encourage people to go to Terry's website and look at his Instagram is just packed full of imagery for sure, and do a follow with him and just look at what he's doing, for his own world. I mean, I think he's completely immersed in what he's doing. He believes in his heart what he's doing. You don't spend that kind of time every day if you don't believe in what you're doing. And it's encouraging when an organization or a museum buys, wants 70 of your pieces as part of their body of work as a permanent collection, because they know people are going to be interested in seeing what he's doing. Can you only imagine just having to store it and not having a place that wants to show it to people for you on your behalf?
But he's very acclaimed. I mean, he's very acclaimed. He's been the director of 4 major galleries in Canada.
He has, yes.
Right? And so he's a busy guy. But he's obviously, by the way, Ian, he's a University of Guelph graduate. Did you read that?
I think I knew that. Yeah. Love his work.
No, I didn't do a great intro on Terry, but I think a lot of people know who Terry is and the work in Canada anyway. But I think for sure, definitely tune into his what he's doing. I think we're near the end of what we're discussing. It's a little on the shorter side today, a little bit, but I think how do we go and move forward to the next step? Like, we're here to talk to artists a little bit about risk taking. How do you encourage an artist, Mark, to take that risk? I guess an educated risk, right? It's part of a business decision. If you're a full-time artist, you have that butterfly in you that if I take this risk and it doesn't respond well, or it takes a while for it to sell, I don't eat, right? So how do you encourage the artist that way? Joanne's shaking her head. Maybe she should answer this one. You're gonna.
Yeah, go
gonna...
ahead, Joanne. I'm interested.
Well,
I just looking at that previous. Sorry, go ahead, Joanne. You go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm gonna go a little bit off topic.
Well, yeah, I was thinking a lot about Terry's work in terms of I find it fascinating, very impactful, interesting, engaging. But it wasn't surprising to me that he's had a lot of support in the public sector in terms of the purchase of his work, the display of his work. And that's wonderful. That's a big part of celebrating art and creativity. And I'm glad we live in a country that does it to the degree we do it. But to take that kind of risk and not, seem to be focused on actual sales in the marketplace to collectors, which is where I live, that's a whole different game. And so to answer your question, that last question, Paul, is within our gallery, we encourage our artists to take risks, but it's understood that the end goal is still to sell that piece of art and celebrate the art by getting it in the hands of a collector. That's the goal. and so the risk that the artists take is I guess to some extent limited and in a big way impacted by that end goal. So I think the end goal is going to be a big determinant of what level and type of artistic risk occurs within an art practice over time. And again, as we've seen with these examples and ones in our gallery, it's interesting that the ones that are the most well received, that sell the best, they seem to know which new direction to go into the best. And we've seen it over and over again. In the odd time when a newer artist or an artist that's less successful tries to go in a new direction, it typically does not work out as well. Not always, but the odds are not the same. Which I think is really interesting, isn't it? That like there's just this, there's a certain talent and ability to understand the process and the marketplace and the outcomes that you're going for that lead to success or not.
I think understanding that there is sometimes a gallery for individual artists. Like not every gallery is good for every artist. So there's probably for Terry maybe less galleries that he could knock on their door with, to say, can you handle my assemblage pieces of work? But when you come in on day one and Terry does this kind of work, and after 10 years or so, where does his risk go when they already know he does this kind of work? Say it was two-dimensional paintings and stuff, but now he's gone into sculpture. That's a small step forward. Like really, if you've accepted them at the early stages, moving on from a two-dimensional kind of a platform on wood to a three-dimensional sculpture, you look at him and say, he's growing in a different way. That's all I'm saying. So Ian, your thoughts on any of them, whether it be Blake or Terry or even on your own work as well?
Yeah, I mean, just to touch on, I think Joanne had mentioned that discussion about rejection and facing rejection and bracing yourself for that. And I think for me, my personal experience started with a very early conversation I had with a couple of relatively successful artists early on in my career, and they talked about collecting rejection letters and just almost like a badge of honor. You've got them lined up, and that kind of reframed things for me and taught me the importance of persevering and being true to yourself regarding the type of art that you want to do, and developing a thick skin, I think, but also understanding that there is a market for so many different types of art, which makes this whole business really rich and rewarding. And by rich, I just mean fulfilling on so many different levels, really. So I think it's up to the artist to find their own path and to persevere and know what they want to say and know what they want to do with their work. And so in responding to some of the the rewards that may come along, but not necessarily listening, or, well, it's important to listen to criticism as well. I think you do have to open yourself up to that. I think you have to be aware of how people do respond to your work, positively and negatively, and then just finding that path for yourself.
Joanne, would you advise an artist that, say, they have an inkling to do some risky stuff, a little bit risky for them? It could be a color change, it could be a subject matter of some kind, creating a little side body of work that's not really seen by anybody too much, and they could develop it on their sideline, so they still have their core area that that I guess we'll call successful. They you got people that want it, and they can earn, whether they're earning a half-life income or you're working at Starbucks and then you're painting, whatever it takes to do a living, but create a little side body of experimental work that, you designate a certain amount of time a week or a month to produce. And after a while, this side body of work starts to find its legs, I guess. Is that kind of advice to do something like that?
100%. Right. So in other words, if there is an artist that has an itch to possibly explore something else, but they're not going to throw away the baby with the bathwater. And I think you set parameters around all of that. You set parameters around the time that you want to invest in that and the financial resources that you want to devote to developing that little side body of work. And that side body of work doesn't necessarily have to pull you away from paying the bills with what you do. One question I did want to tap into or answer about Ian's comment is that, from my experience in working with hundreds and hundreds of artists across the country, every artist path is different. Every motivation for an artist is different. Not every artist is tied up into financial rewards. Most definitely, there are artists that don't aspire to that for whatever reason. But at the end of the day, all artists, I think, want validation, whether it's from an audience, from their peers, whether it's from themselves, that they feel that they've put their best effort into doing a body of work, whether it's something new. They still need to be invested in it, and it has to feel safe in order that they don't just beat themselves up and they take a look at say they've devoted a couple of weeks, 3 weeks to putting new energy into something else, and when they evaluate it and they say that's garbage and I just can't go forward with that, but that they need to have the wherewithal to say, okay, maybe that dream didn't happen, but what else can happen for me to grow and evolve and change? So, we can't slot artists into any type of path that makes sense to anybody, only to them. And every journey is different. That's been my experience in working with so many artists over time.
Yeah. Mark, you have any more to add to what Joanne has talked about a little bit about?
Well, yeah, I mean, that point, I mean, we work with 30 to 35 different artists, and one of the things I love about the business is to her point, they're each so unique, and as individuals that are taking these, I think, incredible risks by putting themselves out there as artists every day. And they go through different emotional peaks and valleys in terms of sales, and we're there to hopefully help them, keep the faith and keep creating and believe in their work. And but it's a really I love the art business because there are so many different characters and ways that it plays out, and it sure makes it interesting every day to be dealing with these artists that are very brave souls. I mean, it's as a business guy, I can fail, and we don't make money, or our business doesn't work, and that's really disappointing. But we're not putting ourselves out there the way an artist does every day.
Yeah.
And
I
think a lot of people that work with artists need to really understand and respect that part of the process.
Yeah. And I'm not a big consumer of buying art, but when I do go to a commercial art gallery, I really like being excited about a new show or a group show or some things like that. And I think I'll travel to another city and pop in to see a gallery, and I'm kind of expecting to see something different, and rather than seeing the same, and you say, how do artists see? Are we all seeing the same way? And it's hard to not go into Georgian Bay area in the fall and get out all your colors. I mean, it's really, really hard. And he said, how do you find, like Ian, you found a palette that is a little bit of, I guess I'll say, abrasive, and it's notice me a little bit kind of a color, because it changes. I'm not trying to depict every leaf on the tree in the palette. There's a inner meaning that's a little deeper in the work than just surface color. And I'm just saying, I think part of that is that risk that people have saying, I want to say more in my work than it's the same old, I think your response, Ian, a little bit. I think we're getting close to our end here, but we'll be combination here a little bit.
Again, I think we all want to see artwork that is compelling, that is evocative, that makes us react. And art can serve so many purposes. It can calm us down. It can relax us. It can remind us of tranquility, but it can also obviously excite us and remind us maybe of the past or the present or the future. And I think artists are using their tricks of the trade, whether it's their brush work, whether it's their color choices, and it's a visual communication. We've chosen. I'm not a writer. I'm not a musician. I like to sing, but nobody wants to hear that. But I've chosen visual means.
Maybe later.
No. But I've chosen to communicate purely visually. So I only have my brushwork, I have my color, I have, and I'm hoping the onus is kind of on the viewer then to respond or react, and sometimes I may have been mentioning that perhaps there's a bewilderment or mystery, but in my experience, the viewer is always correct when they're feeling something in the work. I'm trying to communicate that, right? I'm trying to get them to feel something, to see something. So if the color is maybe a little unexpected or unusual in some way, it's there for a reason, right? It's there to make us connect in some way.
Yeah. No, it's Joanne, you want to round up here a little bit?
Yeah, I want to leave on a really positive note, and I have strong feelings about what is going on in the Canadian art market right now. And I do think that artists need to take more risks. That's my own opinion. But I do think it's up to us, all of us here on this panel today, to continue to encourage and support artists to take that risk and see what happens. I mean, we need more growth, I think, with our artists. There is an element of sameness, and it's clear to me that artists are nervous to take challenges, whether it's financial or emotional, with their work. So I do think it's up to the four of us and beyond us here to encourage artists to think about how they can make a risk, whether it's a small risk, but to try something and have the courage to do it and know that they will be supported with their endeavors when they need the support.
Excuse me. I look at as I guess a consumer of music and listening, and that you follow a certain band or singer. And I remember in the early years, it almost seemed like every month a new song came out by that new band, whether it be the Beatles in the day or, it would be, I'm not going to name any bands, but you knew who they were, but that music, it changed a little bit. Each song was different, but it all belonged together in a Beach Boys. They all had a sound, but the songs were different of the times, right? And I think, how do you put that into your work? Like, how do you create that? Because we followed musicians and we buy all their albums, and some guys got every album that somebody had made. Not every song was perfect in there that you liked, but you picked the ones you liked. But the investment usually was $10 to $20. It wasn't a huge dollar factor, but it said who you were. You looked in the day at your vinyl that was in your room, and somebody says, "Oh, they can look through the vinyl and there's no classical music, but it's all rock and roll." It kind of knew who you were because that's part of you. I think your art in your home and your business say the same kind of thing. If people collect that they feel that resonates with them. But as an artist, the risk thing is you can build eras of work, I think, just like they do records or music. And, whether they're Bob Dylan thing, where they talk about war, it's universal. They become universal. And I think personally, I like work that it lasts longer when it's universal, more so than regional responses. And I think the artist is given credit for thinking a little deeper. And that comes from the risk aspect, is even if the thinking is showing up more in the work, more so than say a color palette change or anything, the content changes a little bit. It's kind of becomes a little bit more sophisticated. It's sort of like if you play checkers, you can play checkers with a 4-year-old, or you can play checkers with a very mature 60-year-old, two different checker games, right? So the planning in one and the other one's just having fun. So I think it's very much the same kind of thing with artists that take a little bit of risk, maybe off to the side, and bring it out every once in a while. I think those things help through osmosis. They kind of work there slowly into the thing, and you present them to Mark, and he eventually likes them and puts them on the wall, and pretty soon they start selling, and you forget about what you did 10 years ago, and maybe you're moving there a little farther. I think it helps. I hate to say this, Mark, it helps the galleries grow as well, because it diversifies your wall space. That's the nice thing about a gallery is there's not as many. There seems to be lots of galleries, but not for artists anymore. And so, and half the time they're closed. Every time I go to a commercial, they're closed on Mondays, and you never know when they are when you drop in, right? But we appreciate everybody's time. Anybody have a little roundup you want to say? One more little thing, Joanne?
I just want artists to be more curious about what's going on, and have the courage to do something that is perhaps evocative or out of the ordinary. And you raise a good point, and maybe this is for another discussion, but I do think Canadian galleries are very sensitive to what the Canadian buying public wants. And does that lend itself to an artist going off the rails into some crazy avant-garde expression? My guess is at this point in the economy that there are not many Canadian art galleries that are going to take a flyer and take a risk with artists that are going out of the zone. Mark, you might want to comment on that.
Is there a way,
I think you're right.
Is there a way, Mark, that artists can have an experience, say, in your gallery to push themselves? Is there an opportunity, some way that maybe you could offer to your 30, 35 artists to say, this is a chance, a week to do some kind of crazy, a little bit, the crazy week, not crazy, but the out there week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think when we had a little chat together, the four of us, I think that's where the idea came up for a gallery like ours. We could do a show that really specialized or focused on new directions by artists. I think that's a great idea.
I like the title. I like the title as well. The show would be a good show.
Right? But at the, in the day-to-day, month-to-month with us, I like to think that we encourage new direction, new work, to some extent, right? Not like Joanne's saying, especially right now, it's it's a challenging time in terms of the art market. But it's part of the process. It's part of helping artists continue to evolve and grow, and that's an important role for a gallery, I think, for lots of different reasons.
I think
so. We encourage that.
No, we encourage bricks and mortar galleries, and the role that you play on behalf of artists, I think, is essential. Yes, we can sell our own work personally, but I think you're more validation in third person where somebody's actually promoting your work. There's the validation is there. I think it's very, very important. Ian, you have a little roundup question?
So I would say maybe I could be the poster boy for for perseverance, and also finding your path. And I've been at this for like 40 years or 40, 50, like a long time, right? And I've continued on with it. And I've got to say, I've been very fortunate to find collectors who get the kind of work that I want to do. And if I could send a message out to artists, it would be to find your path, find your voice, know what your voice is, and express it, and do it in a way that but respecting the gallery world as well. And like Mark was mentioning, I also want to make work that's accessible and work that people can relate to, and rather than completely painting in a void all the time. So it's always a balance between trying to paint the work that I feel very sincere about, and that is very meaningful to me, but also something that we talked about the word universal, and we're trying to find a way to say that in manners that are accessible to the public. So I've been fortunate to be able to find collectors find me, who love to live with the work and get a lot of enjoyment out of it. So that's something for me in my own career that has kept me going, is to get that validation, that we really are all looking for, regardless of our role in the art world.
Great. I really want to thank everybody on the panel. Your input has been invaluable. I mean, we really have about 4 different perspectives here on art and artists. 2 of us are, I guess I'm an artist as well at the same time, but I think, again, it's just really important that these conversations happen, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to artists and through our channel. And maybe there will be a part 2 somewhere down the road here on this. After we encourage commentary and sending an email to myself at Artists in Canada about the show, or comment on YouTube, and like it and share it. I think it'll help, hopefully help some artists. And I really appreciate our guests that we didn't have on, and that being Terry Graff and Blake Ward, and of course David Bowie and his words of wisdom. And I think and you as well, Ian, for sharing your work with us. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, I wish everybody happy, safe summer. What's going on, and we will continue. Thank you very much.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thanks a lot.
Mark. Thanks,
Bye,
Paul.
guys.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye now. Bye-bye.